Hi, everyone. It's Whitney Wiley, and thank you for joining me for 30 Days of Habits. Today, I am joined by Cordelia Gaffar, and she's going to be talking to you about the habit that she shared in the One Habit Smart Fem Summit Special Edition on replenishing yourself and doing that so that you can take care of yourself first. Cordelia, thanks for joining me today. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me, Whitney.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. So you talk about the importance of replenishing, reprogramming yourself so that you can replenish yourself first. Tell us a little bit about what that means.
Yeah, so often we think that in order to replenish ourselves, we have to do something on the outside, but the truth is we have to do something on the inside.
Right.
So the first step for me is always, looking at the self-compassion. Again, a concept that we think of as an outward thing, but self-compassion, clearly you have to have love and compassion for yourself and a deep nurturing. And the steps that I offer and the replenish me allow you to create like a system to nurture yourself. Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. And you're right. We tend to think of things more as outside jobs than inside jobs, but almost everything we do, everything we want to change, everything we want to fix, even though I don't believe we need fixing. I think we need rediscovering, right,
Yeah.
who we are before the world piled on. It, but we think it's like out there, and in fact, it comes from the inside. So, how does this habit actually manifest itself in your life?
Yeah, the way that it manifests is, to your point, once we reprogram all the things that were added to us over our life, right? We go back and we just find out the truth of what our values are, separate from the values that were imposed upon us from our family, culture, society, whatever, and see what it is that's truly important to us and allow a rebirth to happen.
So, you know, I keep thinking about this because as I talk to each author and get more and more insight to what other people are doing, I think about the reprogramming and this need that we have to kind of unburden ourselves, um, not as a not as a chore, but actually an act of self-love, right? And self-care. And you talk about self-compassion and self-forgiveness. How in the Renew program, give us a little insight into how that actually works.
Right. So the steps are release, restructure, refresh, rebirth, right? So in the release, it's really physically moving into your body and understanding what energy centers were mostly impacted. So we have different places where really intense feelings live. Maybe you're a person who's in the habit of doing what's expected and accepted.
Mm,
In order to release that, you may notice that you constantly have pain in your shoulders, your upper back, or sometimes your lower back, because the other end of always taking on other people's burdens is you feel unsupported. And so you'll have lower back pain and hip pain. And so in the release step, once we recognize that, then we look at the stories that created that. And that brings us to the restructure, right? So in restructure, we're choosing better habits that will help us to create an environment within where we can have self-compassion and self-forgiveness. You haven't become the what shall we say, like you're not the doormat of the world,
right.
right? In fact, you're such a loving and caring person that you give your heart away before taking care of it. And so this is, the number one thing. You change the way you speak. You change the story with your vocabulary. And I affectionately call
Mhm.
that sweet talk, right? So instead of the story that we've been burdening ourselves with, oh, I'm just a doormat for everybody, it's like, I'm such a loving and caring person, but I need to pause for the cause of me first. You
Right.
see the difference? It feels
Yes.
so much like. And the other part of that is just choosing um, to understand, okay, so I'm a loving person and I'm showing up in the world this way. What are the values behind, where am I truly coming from? And so I encourage people to do a brain dump and look at what are the things that are important to you, and just pick the top three, because three is easy and
Right.
it's manageable. So you'll find things will come up like, I really like qualities that are like people that are reliable, or I like people that are ethical, or what is it? I like people who are supportive, right? However, if you look around in your inner circle, you're always with people who are needy, people who don't they don't volunteer to help, right? And if you have a book that goes to bestseller with a group of people called The One Habit for Success, they're not going to be your cheerleader. Okay, so when you recognize that, what is it that you can do to change that? Well, you can speak up for, um, you know, if you have to go with a clean slate and just get rid of all those people with the negative energy in your life that don't match your value system, it's okay. It's better to be alone with yourself so you have time for yourself to get better,
Mhm.
acquainted. And then, the other habits we have is I recently did like a replenish and boost your immune system boot camp. And we tackled real time habits like sleep, the way we choose to think,
Okay.
what we're eating, how we're moving, and our emotions. So all of this really builds up to the way we think drives the choices we make,
Right.
which drives the way we feel. And, if you're ruminating on being a people pleaser, then you might self medicate with like too much chocolate or too much, wine or whatever it is. And that's not going to serve you, because when you eat the things that depress your system, then it affects your sleep, which is going to throw off your adrenal system, which is
Right.
going to, and your adrenal system runs the show. And once they're not working, then you'll be sick, and all those things. So in the restructure phase, we're really looking at our choices, how we make those choices. Does it honor our values, and are we choosing people in our life to support that? Now, so the steps 1 and 2 is about the inner work. The steps 3 and 4 about the outer work. So step 3 now, and the refresh, is picking up with the people who are in your circle. Are they supporting and honoring um, your values? Are they supporting your self-compassion and self-forgiveness? And this is where self-belief becomes very important, because when you believe strongly in your truth and your values, it doesn't really matter what people say to you. It's
Right.
like,
Right.
I'm sorry, you're going to have to go. You can't be here. And really stand in your belief, so that in the final step, you just seamlessly can speak your truth and be more importantly your truth, embody it wherever you go, so you're showing up in full self-trust, which is the rebirth.
Wow. That's awesome. The other part of talking with the other authors in the book, the contributors, is that there's a recurring theme here, right? And the habits that we're talking about are about creating and being, as you've said, it being our best selves, right? And putting ourselves first, our health, our emotional well-being, all of those things are not selfish. They are first to serve ourselves and then make it possible for us to serve other people. And without doing the steps that you just described, it becomes difficult to do that because something's always then weighing us down, right? And burdening us. So I want to talk a little bit about the unhabit you have, which is to stop putting everything else, other people, other things ahead of ourselves out of duty. And I love that you added that word duty in there. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this word it's a reoccurring theme that I've seen in the different groups of women that I work with, right? So we all feel like we have a duty to be the good daughter, the good mother, the professional woman, and it's really just a lie. And being good is showing up in your truth.
Right.
Being awesome and amazing is being your truth. And so we have to shed this duty to others, right? The duty is only to yourself, always,
Right.
to your higher self. And so duty is not, I'm not saying it's a dirty word, right?
Sort of is though, right?
It kind of is though. I'm just, okay, I'm saying it's a dirty word. I'm going to come clean.
Well, kids certainly think it's a dirty word.
Yeah. But it's a reprogramming in that way too, right? So it's not the same kind of dirty word that it is that when we were kids, of course, when we were kids, but it's like, it is definitely like dragging dirty laundry behind you, so just shed the need to be someone else's standard of good and just stick to what you feel is good.
Well, I think the beauty of what you say about, shedding the duty ultimately is that when we're whole and healthy and moving in the world from a place of replenishment after the reprogramming, is that we don't serve from a place of duty, we can serve from a place of love. And that has a whole different connotation for ourselves. We can do the exact same act, right? One out of duty, one out of love, one drains and one uplifts and empowers, and we can feel really good about it. And so I think in that respect, that's why duty is a dirty word, right? Not in and of itself, is just a word. But when you look at it in that context, it makes a huge difference to be able to, to have, whether it's cooking a meal or sitting down to have a meal with someone. And it's like, I've got to cook dinner tonight, as opposed to, I lovingly and gratefully, prepare a meal for my family, right? That it weighs on you differently. And therefore, the things that you talked about and the way these things manifest physically in our bodies, that's how we get there. And I don't think we think about that enough. So.
Yeah. I always go into the kitchen thinking, what can I create? And so my kids are like, Mom, you made like rice and beans yesterday, but this one tastes so different. What's the new ingredient? I said, what do you think it is? And so my little one, she already knows. She's like, oh, you put love in it.
Oh, I love that. And that's the difference, right? The difference between doing something out of duty or obligation and doing it out of love. So Cordelia, thank you so much for joining me, for sharing about the replenishing and how to get to a place where we are renewed and refreshed at first, right? So that we can go into the world, into our families, into the world with love, compassion of self, which allows us to be compassionate for other people, and all the other things you talked about. Do you have any final parting words before we go?
Of course, remember that you are the creator of elevated opportunity.
Love that.
So, yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for joining us. And if you haven't purchased your copy of the One Habit Smart Femme Summit Special Edition, the link is on the post, and we hope you'll get it. Grab a habit, implement it, integrate it into your life, and then move on to another one. So thank you for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care. Bye.